This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, was the Saudi Arabian royal family connected to the apparent murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi? And will this crime affect America's relations with the Saudis? Plus, a rocket attack from terrorists in Gaza lands on a home in southern Israel. Is Israel getting ready to go to war after terrorism and weeks of violent protests in Gaza? And he's a retired minister who wants to lead a Bible study in his own home, but he can't. We're going to tell you why and find out what's being done about it. All those stories and more are ahead in this half hour of CBN Newswatch. A pro-government Turkish newspaper has published a gruesome account of the alleged murder of Saudi writer Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, showing the writer was tortured before he was killed. And a New York Times report connects 3 of the suspects in the disappearance of the Washington Post columnist to the Saudi royal family. It says they served as part of the Crown Prince's security team. President Donald Trump, who earlier said there would be severe punishment if the kingdom was found responsible for Khashoggi's disappearance, again warned Tuesday against rushing to conclusions.
And it depends whether or not the king or the crown prince knew about it, in my opinion. Number one, what happened, but whether or not they knew about it. If they knew about it, that would be bad.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in Turkey for talks with the Turkish government about Khashoggi's disappearance. And our senior reporter, Dale Hurd, joins us now. He's been following this story. So how likely is it that the security team is responsible and had gone rogue on this operation?
On their own, it's not likely at all. And it's also unlikely that they came to murder Khashoggi. They messed up, which is surprising in a country used to torturing people, I have to say. These guys have a lot of experience. So somebody messed up, and somebody's probably going to pay when this hit squad gets back to Saudi Arabia.
Now, if the evidence trail leads all the way to the Saudi royal family, could that cause a serious breach in U.S.-Saudi relations?
I don't think for long. This relationship is deep and historic, and it's strange to say, and it's weird to say that this barbaric, dictatorship in the Middle East is one of our closest allies, and they want to be our ally. They don't want to be allied to another power. They have deep affection for the United States, so I think it continues.
America, of course, is now the world's leading oil producer. So why does the U.S. government still seem to want the alliance with the Saudis?
Yeah, oil used to be the excuse. Right. Now the excuse is Iran. With Iran in the neighborhood, the enemy of my enemy, Iran, is my friend, Saudi Arabia. And we're willing to look past a whole lot of awful stuff to have this buttress against Iran in the Middle East.
Okay, makes sense. Dale Hurd, thank you so much for following us for us today. Turning now to Israel's defense ministry is calling for war on Gaza to restore calm as Israel faces an escalation in violence along its southern border and beyond. CBN's Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us that story now from Jerusalem.
Terrorists in the Gaza Strip launched a rocket before dawn that crashed into a home in the southern Israeli city of Beersheba, nearly 30 miles from Gaza. A mother and her 3 children were safe because they had gone to the bomb shelter when the warning sirens sounded. In response, the IDF said Israeli planes struck more than 20 Hamas targets, including a terror tunnel which crossed into Israel, and a factory used to manufacture components to build tunnels. The IDF also released a video showing a terror squad setting up a launching pad, loading rockets, and the IDF strike on the squad. The rocket attack came a day after Israeli Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said he is pressing for upgraded military action to quiet the situation in Gaza. He said, "My position is very clear. We must deal a heavy blow against Hamas. This is the only way to return the situation to its previous state and to reduce the level of violence to nearly zero."
Hamas isn't trying to achieve any truce with Israel. Hamas is trying to achieve political aims by using violence. This is what terrorist organizations do.
IDF spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus said Hamas is trying to involve the international community.
What they're doing is sending Palestinian civilians forward, causing them to endanger themselves by attacking Israel, and then hoping that these civilian casualties will generate or garner international interest in what's happening and perhaps alleviate the situation in Gaza.
A second rocket was also apparently launched at Tel Aviv and landed in the Mediterranean. It's the first time a rocket was launched toward Tel Aviv since the 2014 Gaza war. The rocket attack was the latest in escalating violence, which has seen Palestinian rioting along the Gaza border for nearly 7 months. Karen Kayemet Israel, the Jewish National Fund, also said attacks from arson balloons and kites from Gaza since April have destroyed more than half of the forested areas surrounding Gaza. Political leaders are calling for Israel to take tougher action and not allow Hamas to erode Israel's deterrence. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. The Centers for Disease Control is warning of a possible outbreak of a new polio-like disease called acute flaccid myelitis, or AFM. It starts with flu or strep-like symptoms, but according to doctors, it can quickly attack the spinal cord, causing paralysis in the arms and legs, facial drooping, and trouble swallowing. So far this year, there have been 62 confirmed cases in 22 states, most of them children. The average age, just 4 years old. The cause is unknown. President Donald Trump has threatened to cut aid to 3 Central American nations if they allow people to travel to the U.S. illegally. This comes after a caravan of 2,000 migrants advanced through Guatemala with hopes of breaching the U.S. border. The president tweeted saying anyone entering the U.S. illegally will be arrested, detained, and deported. The city of Atlanta has agreed to pay its former fire chief $1.2 million for unjustly firing him for sharing his biblical beliefs. Kevin Cochran was terminated for handing out a devotional book he wrote to his co-workers, which mentioned the biblical view that homosexuality is a sin. Last year, a judge ruled the city violated Cochran's First Amendment rights to free speech. The city council voted on Monday to pay the former fire chief, recognizing he had been unjustly treated. You can find out more on these stories and others throughout the day at cbnnews.com. The death toll from Hurricane Michael has increased to 31, including 16 in Florida. The people of Mexico Beach and Port St. Joe in Florida endured the worst of Michael, and many will never be the same. Chuck Holton was able to fly into the hardest hit areas and talk to some of them, where looting is a real danger as residents run short of food, water, and fuel.
Right now I'm flying over Mexico Beach, and they say it looks like it's been bombed. Well, having been to Mosul, Iraq in the last couple of years, I can tell you that it actually does look real similar. The difference is I'm looking at houses that are completely turned upside down, or houses that have been not just blown up, but picked up and moved and set down in the middle of the street. That's just not something you see in a war zone. This is absolutely astonishing. I mean, when you look at the scale of the destruction right here, there were houses all along right here before the storm, and now there are just concrete slabs.
There's FEMA.
So we're seeing FEMA and a lot of other emergency services coming into this area, setting up temporary cell phone towers and distributing water and food and that sort of thing. But the people here that we talked to said that they are in desperate need of fuel, propane gas for their stoves, and things like blankets and cots because they're having to sleep out in the open.
We sat down in nearby St. Joe Beach to talk to some survivors and hear their incredible stories of what it was like to ride out the storm.
What happened was I was in the house here and I looked out the front window and the water was 3 inches coming down the street. By the time I looked in the back door, it was already pouring through the back door. I had 4 Jack Russells. I run a business called Kayak Dog Adventures. And so I grabbed the dogs, threw them on the fridge, and as the water poured in, the doors got locked up. It came in quickly. It rose to the top of this window. In 6 minutes, I had the dogs. And you see this grass line here? That's how quick it filled up. I busted this window out with a broom, took 2 dogs, swam out, put them in my boat. while it was raging about 150-mile-an-hour winds. And then I couldn't get the other dogs to come to me because the water was already here and I didn't want to go back in. But the glass, I finished breaking out some more glass and I went one more time back in there, grabbed my other 2 dogs, swam back through the hole, put them back in the boat, and just rolled over in the boat and rode it in the boat.
As desperation mounts, looting becomes more widespread.
People come down the street, people are still picking up their items and stuff like that, you know, looking for them in the bushes and stuff here. And people turn the corners here and they just jump out and grab coolers and boards and kayaks and whatever they see on the edge of the road and take off around the corner. So, you know, you should give people a minute to pick up their stuff and find what they can before, you know, come in for cleanup and stuff like that. Looters will be shot, and hung, and shot again.
In Panama City Beach, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Coming up, the case of a retired minister who's involved in a battle to hold a Bible study in his own apartment. We're going to have that interview when we come back. A retired minister, Ken Khashoggi, along with the support from First Liberty Institute Legal Group, is fighting for his right to hold a Bible study at his senior living community in Virginia. He was asked to start the group by other residents. Many of them say they can't always go to church anymore, and the Bible study on the property was a blessing to them. It grew so much that at one point they asked to use a community room. The complex did grant them permission to do that, but then later told them they couldn't hold the Bible study there. Khashoggi was also told by management that they could be evicted even if they held that Bible study in their own apartment.
For my wife and I, it's sort of like resting in the eye of a hurricane. You know, in the eye of the hurricane, it's peaceful and quiet. Just don't get up against the walls.
I had the opportunity to speak about the Khashoggi's case with Jeremy Dyes of First Liberty. Where do things stand right now for this pastor?
Well, right now, he's had to end his Bible study for the foreseeable future until we can resolve this with the Housing and Urban Development, the U.S. Department for Housing and Urban Development, where we filed a complaint because it's patently illegal for an organization like the Evergreens at Smith Commons there to deny someone the right to be able to use the community room for a Bible study. In fact, they wanted him to call it a book review rather than a Bible study. But beyond that, to say that he cannot even use his own apartment or someone's apartment there on campus to host a Bible study amongst friends, I mean, they shouldn't be telling anyone what they can and cannot talk about in their own apartments, let alone a Bible study. And so we are hoping that Secretary Ben Carson, once he finds out about this case and reviews the complaint that we've made with HUD, that they'll investigate this and resolve this matter.
In light of who is running Housing and Urban Development, Dr. Ben Carson, as you mentioned, we know that he's an outspoken Christian. Are you expecting favorable action?
Well, we certainly hope so. What we've seen right now is that the management company at this senior center, this retirement community, is acting unlawfully and, frankly, unconstitutionally. They're telling the residents that they can't study the Bible in their own apartment. That is a classic definition of religious discrimination in housing. And so we've made that complaint to HUD and asked them to investigate that, and I hope that they will do so from top to bottom. Sadly, it's not the first time we've seen this. We represent Donna Dunbar down in Port Charlotte as well, another senior center there, where she was told she could not use her community room to study the scriptures as well. That's incorrect, and that's unlawful. And so we're making sure that HUD is aware of these repeated instances of religious discrimination, these violations of the Constitution, and giving Secretary Carson every chance he can to review them and to correct them.
This just seems so odd. I visit community centers myself where we do hold Bible studies. Why are these community centers doing this?
That's a great question for the community centers themselves. The only answer I can provide to you is that either they don't know what the law is, which is concerning on a significant level, or they know what the law is and they just simply want to engage in discrimination anyway. But either way you look at it, it's both shameful and illegal for companies like this who run these senior centers to tell elderly residents, Ken and his wife are 80 plus years old, and to threaten them with the possibility of putting them out on the street through eviction for hosting a Bible study in their apartment. That's incorrect. Not only is it incorrect, it's unlawful and it violates the Constitution, and it must stop.
Have they given any legal justification for their action? Doesn't sound like they understand what religious liberty is.
I don't know what kind of justification they could possibly provide for violating the First Amendment rights of our clients and violating the law so flagrantly here. What we know is that we've sent them a demand letter, asked them to communicate with us. They have not responded to that demand letter. That left us with no other choice but to file a complaint with HUD and ask them to review this situation. But I want to let everybody listening today know that they can be a part of this as well. Go to firstliberty.org, sign our petition to HUD and Secretary Carson that they'll be involved with this situation and correct it for seniors everywhere. No senior should face the prospect of eviction for simply hosting a Bible study in their apartment.
Any advice for others facing this sort of discrimination for their faith?
Absolutely. Number one, be faithful to it and make sure that you know what your rights are. You can learn those at firstliberty.org. And if this comes your way again, and I'm sad to say that it just very well may across this country of ours, if that does happen, call us at firstliberty.org. Let us help you out because no senior should face the possibility of eviction or any type of religious discrimination in housing in situations like this.
Now, you've talked to the Higgs. How are they in the midst of all of this?
Well, they're disappointed. I mean, in more than just the Haugies, what we have here is a number of residents at this center that can't even get out of their apartments for the week. They can't go to church. They're immobile. They're not able to be transported to a local church. And so this isn't very much their time to worship. And yet you have a management company that has simply dug in their heels and refused to accommodate residents and their spiritual needs. That is a tragic thing. And frankly, it's a shameful situation in which we find a management company acting illegally, stopping and preventing people from worshiping in their own homes.
Jeremy Dyes, firstliberty.org. Thank you so much for your time. Coming up next, a plan for a modern-day underground railroad, but this one would be for women wanting an abortion if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. That is the decision that legalized abortion. We're going to take a look at that issue coming up right after this. Abortion activists have already created a plan that guarantees women access to abortion just in case Roe v. Wade is overturned by the now conservative-leaning U.S. Supreme Court. I spoke with our Mark Martin about one abortion provider's plan to create an underground railroad, if you will, of sorts for abortion. Here's a quick look at that interview. Mark Martin joins us now with more on this story. Mark?
Yeah, Planned Parenthood Action has announced its new Care for All plan. Now, it explains, quote, there are 13 abortion-related cases that are just one step away from the Supreme Court. And, quote, 20 states are poised to ban abortion should Roe v. Wade be overturned. A Planned Parenthood document explaining the plan says the organization has been working on the plan, saying, quote, since before Trump and Pence took office. The document goes on to say, with the confirmation of Justice Brett Kavanaugh, we are kicking our plan into high gear. This multi-million-dollar nationwide effort will be working to ensure that abortion is still accessible in the United States, no matter what happens at the Supreme Court, end quote. The plan has been called an abortion underground railroad by a writer with Salon.com. That article says the abortion activists believe Roe will be overturned in the next 2 years. Planned Parenthood's Care for All plan is set up in 3 parts. Take a look. Expand services in states where abortion is likely to remain legal and accessible. Partner with state advocates and coalition partners, and fight abortion restrictions at their source. Meanwhile, Planned Parenthood clinic director turned pro-life activist Abby Johnson spoke with CBN News on the set of a new film depicting her life. The film shows her emotional decision to quit after watching an abortion via ultrasound. Johnson spoke about the spiritual warfare involved in the battle over abortion.
We pray every day. We pray against spiritual warfare in our home, in our marriage, with our family, and certainly with various pro-life projects that I'm a part of, and certainly this film.
Now back to Planned Parenthood's new Care for All plan. The concluding paragraph reads, we will never back down, and today we are fighting for all of our rights and freedoms. No matter what Donald Trump, Mike Pence, or Brett Kavanaugh may say, each of us deserves the right to control our own bodies, including the right to decide if and when to become a parent. Ephraim?
What are pro-life leaders saying about this new plan?
Well, I went to lifesitenews.com, and it was mostly informational, again, kind of like what we're doing here, laying out the basics of the plan. But I'm sure as it gets more publicity, we're going to see many pro-life leaders speaking out in opposition to it.
And you can count on us to cover it. Thanks a lot, Mark. Up next, children at one middle school in Virginia will not be able to sing about Jesus during Christmas. We're going to have that story when we come back. A Virginia middle school is removing all mention of Jesus Christ in its upcoming school-wide Christmas program. David Allen, whose child attends Robius Middle School, is unhappy about the sudden change. He emailed the choir teacher. The teacher said the school took Jesus out of the production to be more sensitive to the school's increasingly diverse population. Allen told WBTV he was trying to rationalize how the school could encourage diversity and yet be exclusionary of one specific area. It is time now for your Wednesday word, and today's word is restore. Know this, God restores, and that's true no matter what you feel you've lost. It also doesn't matter exactly how long ago you may have suffered that loss. With that word, I encourage you to make this a wonderful Wednesday. And thank you so much for joining us for this half hour of CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. A pro-government Turkish newspaper has published a gruesome account of the alleged murder of Saudi writer Jamal Khashoggi at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, showing the writer was tortured before he was killed. And a New York Times report connects 3 of the suspects in the disappearance of the Washington Post columnist to the Saudi royal family. It says they served as part of the Crown Prince's security team. President Donald Trump, who earlier said there could be severe punishment if the kingdom was found to be responsible for Khashoggi's disappearance, again warned Tuesday against rushing to conclusions.
And it depends whether or not the king or the crown prince knew about it, in my opinion. Number one, what happened, but whether or not they knew about it. If they knew about it, that would be bad.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has arrived in Turkey for talks with the Turkish government about Khashoggi's disappearance. Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. Terrorists in the Gaza Strip launched a rocket before dawn that crashed into a home in the southern Israeli city of Beersheba. No one was hurt. In response, the IDF said Israeli planes struck more than 20 Hamas terror targets, including a terror tunnel. And Israel's defense minister is now calling for war on Gaza to restore calm. The rocket attack was the latest in escalating violence along the Gaza border by Hamas. The terror group has been inciting violence in the area for nearly 7 months. The Centers for Disease Control is warning of a possible outbreak of a new polio-like disease called acute flaccid myelitis, or AFM. It starts with flu or strep-like symptoms, but according to doctors, it can quickly escalate to hurt the spinal cord, causing paralysis in the arms and legs, as well as facial drooping and trouble swallowing. So far this year, there have been at least 62 confirmed cases in 22 states, most of them children. The average age, just 4 years old. The cause is still not known. President Donald Trump threatened Tuesday to cut aid to 3 Central American nations if they allow people to travel to the United States illegally. This comes after a caravan of 2,000 migrants advanced through Guatemala with hopes of reaching the U.S. border. President Donald Trump tweeted saying anyone entering the U.S. illegally will be arrested, detained, and deported. You can find more on these stories and others throughout the day at cbnnews.com. The city of Atlanta has agreed to pay its former fire chief $1.2 million for unjustly firing him for sharing his biblical beliefs. Kevin Cochran was terminated for handing out a devotional book he had written to his co-workers, which mentioned the biblical view that homosexuality is a sin. Last year, a judge ruled the city violated his First Amendment rights to free speech. The city council voted on Monday to pay the former fire chief, recognizing he had been unjustly treated. 2 Christian filmmakers are facing the threat of heavy fines and even jail time for refusing to produce and create films supporting same-sex marriage. Carl and Angel Larson own Telescope Media Group in Minnesota. They say providing media services for gay weddings violates their religious beliefs. In 2017, the couple filed a legal challenge to Minnesota's same-sex marriage law, but a lower court dismissed their case and mandated they service same-sex weddings or close that part of their business. The Alliance Defending Freedom is helping the couple, who's now making an appeal. No running water, no electricity, and no way to get food. That remains the plight of people in St. Andrews community in Florida's Panhandle. Catastrophic damage from Hurricane Michael has these survivors desperate for help. And Operation Blessing is on the ground in this hardest hit area, meeting their needs.
With 155-mile-per-hour winds that snap trees like twigs and blew roofs off homes, Hurricane Michael's fierce lashing of Florida has left a mark that will not go away soon.
We really need tarps and help with fixing roofs, removing trees out of yards, because you got a lot of people going around trying to scam the elderly and charging what they shouldn't and getting a check ahead of time and not coming to do the work. $5,000 just to cut a tree down.
We're here in the historic area known as St. Andrews, nearly 1 week after Hurricane Michael pummeled the panhandle of Florida. And people in this community are still desperate for help. They have no running water, they have no electricity, and most have no way to get to food distributions at local churches. So residents were thrilled when volunteers from Operation Blessing came to them.
Every morning, volunteers gather at Lighthouse Church in Panama City Beach to coordinate teams and minister to the community.
To spread the love of Jesus out to all those that are hurting in our community. We are the church. We are God's hands and feet. Let them know that help is on the way.
Without electricity, people are hot and hungry. And with few gas stations open, it's hard to get around.
I love it and thank y'all so much. I appreciate it.
Jacqueline Gaynor lives alone and has cancer, yet she perseveres through her trust in God.
Well, it's hard, it's rough, but I keep the faith and keep trying to move on. Then I know what he can do and what he will do. And I just ask him, I ask not greedy, but needed, because other people around here is in bad shape too.
And the Operation Blessing volunteers will not be forgotten.
They're angels. That's all I can say, they're angels.
It's very overwhelming. Lots of people in tears. They're grateful. We did a lot of praying for people, not just handing them essentials, but also praying with them. It meant a lot to them.
Volunteers are thrilled to partner with Operation Blessing to help ease the suffering during a time of such overwhelming need.
That you guys have been wonderful. You've been a huge blessing. We had multiple families today that were shouting at us, wearing our shirts. God bless you. Thank you, Operation Blessing. They were screaming Operation Blessing, and it brought tears to our eyes.
And you can learn more about Operation Blessing by going to its website, ob.org. Coming up, we take you to the pygmy colonies in Uganda where miracles are unfolding in the heart of the jungle.
Are you currently on Medicare? In other words, do you carry the red, white, and blue Medicare card? If so, are you suffering from chronic back pain or knee pain? If you answered yes, you may be eligible for a pain-relieving back brace or knee brace covered by Medicare at little to absolutely no cost to you.
Call 800-358-5058 right now to see if you qualify.
These professional-grade back braces are ideal for lower back pain, rheumatoid and osteoarthritis, spinal disorders, stenosis, and other painful back problems. Our medical-grade durable knee braces are designed for those with osteoarthritis and general knee pain and weakness. Our accredited staff will handle all of the Medicare paperwork, and best of all, your braces shipped directly to your home for free. Will you qualify for a Medicare-covered back brace or knee brace? There's only one way to find out.
Call the Back and Knee Brace Center at 800-358-5058. That's 800-358-5058.
Are you or a loved one between the ages of 50 to 80 years old? If you are younger than 80 years old, do you receive Social Security, disability, or Medicare? If you answered yes, you may qualify for $30,000 in funeral insurance for only pennies a day. The average funeral costs around $11,000, and Social Security only pays $255, leaving your loved ones to pay the balance. Call now to see if you qualify for $30,000 in funeral expense coverage from Senior Legacy Life. Your rate will never increase, your benefits will never decrease, and there is no medical exam, even if you have a pre-existing disease or illness. Don't be a financial burden to your family. Lock in your rate by completing an application over the phone right now. Will you qualify for funeral insurance up to $30,000 for only pennies a day? Find out for free by calling Senior Legacy Life.
Call 1-800-914-7690. That's 1-800-914-7690. 1-800-914-7690.
For centuries, they lived in caves and trees while hunting in the jungle, a remote African tribe called the Batwa Pygmies. About 25 years ago, the Ugandan government forced them out of the forest, leaving them homeless and destitute. Now, one Christian ministry is helping them to rebuild their lives. Our George Thomas has the remarkable story from southwestern Uganda.
You're about to see images never captured on camera. Until now. From deep in the lush green jungles of Africa comes the story of one of this continent's oldest living tribes.
We used to live like animals in the jungle.
Yovanis Nyirkayanje is a Batwa pygmy. For centuries, her people were rainforest dwellers.
We smoked, we drank, we performed witchcraft. We were devil worshippers.
Dr. Scott Kellerman, an American physician, is studying the Batwa people.
They're very diminutive. They're only 4.5 feet in height. They typically hunted with poison tip arrows or nets, collect fruit from the trees or roots from the ground.
Their life revolved around the Biwindi forest of southwestern Uganda.
And actually, they were pre-Stone Age. They had no stone implements. So that's the reason very few records are found of the Batwa.
The Batwa were known as the keepers of the forest, but that all dramatically changed back in 1992 when the government here in the Ugandan capital city of Kampala decided to turn their habitat into a national park and a World Heritage Site for endangered mountain gorillas. There are about 750 mountain gorillas in the world, and 350 live within the Biwindi forest.
So the result was it was made a World Heritage Site, and the Batwa were evicted from the forest.
After centuries of living in caves and trees, the Batwa became conservation refugees. With no title to land, no food, no clothing, no shelter, thousands of them walked out of the jungle to a world that turned against them.
The people could not even give them what to do because they thought maybe these Batwa, the pygmies, are like animals.
Tugumi Gerald and his wife Barbara decided to help some of the Batwa. They moved from their home in Uganda's capital to the small village of Kisoro on the edge of the equatorial jungle to begin a ministry among the pygmies.
I began by preaching the message of hope to the hopeless.
Hundreds of Batwa pygmies heard about Jesus for the very first time. Yovanis Nyirkayanje was one of Gerald's first converts.
It was the first time anyone had ever told us about Jesus. We were servants of the devil. But then we heard Christ died for our sins, and that changed our lives.
I baptize you
on this day
in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
37 responded to the gospel message and got baptized in a river. Gerald says miracles are also happening among the Batwa. People diagnosed with HIV/AIDS are getting healed. A pygmy girl on the verge of death given new life.
They brought the child here. She was dead almost. They started praying for her. They prayed. Actually, they prayed for 5 hours. I was around. I couldn't believe. I was there myself. The child got healed.
It all led to this. The first ever Batwa pygmy church in the region.
At times we get up to 1,000 pygmies who come to attend the church. Hello.
They also run a school for pygmy children. And parents, once animal hunters, are learning to be farmers. But the needs here are enormous.
If you can imagine poverty, which exists everywhere in the world, yet these are the poorest of the poor.
After making several trips out here, Tino Kahush, a documentary producer and Regent University graduate, decided to get involved. He got a handful of churches in Sweden to partner with Batwa Christians.
What I like about this ministry is run by the Batwa pygmies themselves. They have formed a board, they are caring for their own people, and we just want to empower them and give them some resources to stand on their feet.
No one knows for sure, but it's estimated that there are still tens of thousands of Batwa who have yet to hear the name of Jesus Christ.
Just as Christ did for me, I believe his message of salvation is going to change the lives of my tribe.
In the meantime, Gerald welcomes Christians from around the world to join him in the adventure of reaching one of the most unreached people groups in the world.
We need people to stand with us in prayers so that God may use us more to reach as many pygmies as possible.
George Thomas, CBN News, Uganda.
Coming up, we're going to sit down with funny man Michael Jr. and talk about his new film, More Than Funny. That's coming up next. Well, you've probably seen comedian Michael Jr. on The Tonight Show, Jimmy Kimmel Live, and in the film War Room. Well, now you can catch him on the big screen in his own comedy special. It's called More Than Funny, and it's in theaters for one day only, tomorrow, October 18th. I sat down with the comedian to learn about the film, and I got a few laughs on the way.
So you've been coaching for 30 years. So as a coach, have you ever said this or something like this? Have you ever looked at your team and said, listen, the stuff I'm teaching you here is not just about this game. You can apply it to life. You ever say that? Exactly. Here's the thing about that statement, Coach. It's not true. I need you to stop saying it immediately. Let me explain. Straight out of high school, I got a job parking cars. One of the cars was really nice, so I took it for a little spin. Company found out my boss lost the account. He was yelling at me, screaming. I didn't know what to say or do. I thought back to my high school football coach. I looked at my boss, I was like, you know what, man? You win some, you lose some, man. You can't let this one loss get you down. Listen, the important thing is I went out there and I had fun.
That was Michael Jr. on stage, and he joins us now here in studio. So the film, More Than Funny.
Yes.
Why is it more than funny?
Well, it kind of started, so I was doing a show about 9 years ago in Los Angeles at this comedy club. And right before I got on stage, I had a change in mindset about comedy. Normally when a comedian gets on stage, we want to get laughs from people. And I felt like a shift took place where I felt like God was saying, instead of trying to get laughs from people, I want you to give them an opportunity to laugh. So this changed everything. So I go on stage that night, we have a good time, but it's different. Like I'm way more relaxed. The audience seems to be way more responsive. And then I leave and I go outside and there's people who are taking pictures, they want autographs. It's the same situation whenever I leave this club, but this time when I walk outside, I see a homeless guy. So I asked myself, I was like, what about him? How could I give him an opportunity to laugh? So I started thinking about that, and then 4 days later, this lady at one of my events came up to me and she said, hey, would you consider coming to the homeless shelter where I work at to do comedy? And I was like, wow. No, I'm not. no, I never even thought of such a thing. Why would you do that? So I actually went to that shelter and did comedy, and then it was so powerful. So what we decided to do, we added that to our tour. So when we would go to a city, we'd find a homeless shelter or a prison, abused children's facility, and we would do comedy there before the big comedy show that night. So one night I'm on stage and I feel like, so when I'm on stage, I'm really asking the question, what can I give to this audience? Whether it be laughter or whatever the case might be, as a result of that shift that took place 9 years ago. So this in particular night, I feel like I should share one of the stories from the abused children's facility I was at in the middle of my comedy show. So the story's not funny at all. No. Why would I share this story? Mm-hmm. But I'm listening between the gaps, and I just feel like, I really feel like God is saying, share the story. So I went on ahead and I shared the story, and the audience is captivated, but they're not laughing, but they're locked in. So then I segue, and I can't even tell you what I said, I segue back to the comedy, and the laughs were even bigger. Now you would think people would be startled, but no, they were bigger. It's like we went deeper. So we just continued to do that, and then when it came time to film my comedy special, I was like, why don't I take my camera crew, we go out, we find the best 3 stories that we can, and we put them in the middle of the jokes. So that's the more part of the comedy special, More Than Funny.
This is not just a film. It seems like it's the beginning of a movement.
That would be awesome. First of all, this has never been done before. And we're hoping that there's a little thing at the end that, or close to the end, where I kind of break the fourth wall a little bit and people aren't expecting it. And when you see this movie, I think I'm hoping that something kind of cool could take place, but I won't necessarily give it away. You gotta see the movie.
You gotta see it. You really do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's life changing. Even the way you break down what comedy is.
Yeah.
And the fact that applies to all of our lives.
Yeah, and I could share some of that.
Go ahead. Yeah,
okay. All right, cool. So I figured out the way comedy works, and I've been doing comedy for probably like 25 years now. But the way comedy works is a comedian will use any resource, any talent he has to make an audience think in one direction. Well, the punchline occurs when he changes that direction in a way they're not expecting. Yeah. And when they catch on to that change, that's actually them receiving the punchline, and the results are revelation, fulfillment, and joy, but it's expressed through laughter. Life, I feel like God has shown me that life is very, very similar. There's a setup, and then there's a punchline. Your setup is the fact that you're married, you got a car, you got a house. Your setup is about what you've received, but your punchline is about what you're called to deliver. So in this movie, you actually see some people delivering their punchline, not just me, and then you're inspired in a way and given some tools, some practical tools on what to do to figure out what it is and even walk in it. And here's the thing, if I only make one person laugh and change their heart, well, that's not enough. I'm gonna need more than one person to do that. But God has a plan, and I just can't wait to see what happens as a result of it. They can go to the More Than Funny Movie. They can go to morethanfunnymovie.com, put in the name of their city or their zip code, and it'll pop up as to where the movie's playing near you. And hopefully the theater's not sold out, but if it is, call them and say, hey, can you add another screen?
Yeah.
And they'll do that sometime too.
Cool.
So
excellent.
I'm excited, man.
More Than Funny. Get to the theater and see it.
You're a good interviewer, man.
Thank
good
you.
Stuff.
Thank
cool.
you. Your pleasure.
People probably got us confused though.
Two black men with bald heads. The movie More Than Funny is in theaters tonight. It is very worth seeing. You should stay to the end for the challenge. We'll be right back. Tim Tebow has a new film coming to theaters, and you don't want to miss it. Run the Race tells the inspiring tale of two young brothers facing unbelievable odds. The film shows what is possible when you trust and believe in God. Tebow is the executive producer of the film alongside his brother Robbie. It is a project he hopes will encourage and inspire many. The film is set to hit theaters in February. Well, right now, it is time for your Wednesday's Word, and today's word is give. This is a great day to give. Lend a hand to someone in need. In the end, you'll actually get more than you give. With that word, make it a wonderful Wednesday and push the restart button on the week. Press forward and give. That will do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're there as well. We'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Goodbye and God bless.